I would like to go ahead and introduce our evening's presenter, the National Consultant for Faith Formation from Loyola Press, Mr. Joe Paprocki.
Well, thanks very much, Nick, and welcome to all of you who are joining us for this Lenten webinar. I don't know what it's like by you, but here in the Midwest and probably all the way to the mid-Atlantic states, the weather outside is frightful, which of course makes a webinar all the more delightful. And so you get to stay warm and dry at home and still participate in this learning experience. So thanks for being with us. As Nick mentioned, I'm the National Consultant for Faith Formation for Loyola Press, but even more important, I'm an 8th grade catechist in Evergreen Park, Illinois, and I blog about that experience at www.catechistjourney.com. And if you visit my blog, you'll see a feature there that allows you to subscribe, I should say, to receive my posts by email. So once again, welcome. Thanks for joining us, and thanks also for the wonderful comments that you've been sending in about what you've done during Lent, and we're going to take a look at those very soon. And of course, the season of Lent is coming upon us very fast. It's a week from tomorrow, Ash Wednesday, February 17th. And as Lent approaches, there always seems to be one very important question that is on all of our minds. And of course that is, what am I going to do for Lent this year? You know, for many of us, this question can seem somewhat frustrating because, you know, less than 2 months ago, many of us were making New Year's resolutions. And I have a sinking feeling that a lot of us haven't kept those New Year's resolutions. So now here we are again making resolutions about what we're going to do for Lent. Well, it's important to know that Lenten practices are really quite different than New Year's resolutions, which of course tend to focus on self-improvement. And Lent is not really about self-improvement. It's not about what we're doing at all. It's about what God is doing and what God wants to do in our lives. And so, in fact, the question of what am I going to do for Lent is really the wrong question to ask. You know, in their book, Praying Lent, Andy Alexander and Maureen McCann Waldron tell us that if we focus too much on what we are going to do or not do, we risk missing out on the gift that God wants to give us. So in other words, Lent is a time for us to kind of clean up the clutter in our lives and in order to find out what God wants to do with us. We're going to be drawing a lot of the content for this webinar from this very handy little book that you see on your screen, Praying Lent, a very helpful resource for yourself and for those you teach. So our job during Lent is to predispose ourselves to recognizing what God wants to do with us. And how do we do this? Well, it's actually quite simple, and that's why I call this webinar Lent Made Simple but Not Easy. The church makes Lent very simple for us, telling us that there are only 3 things that we need to focus on. And we call these 3 things the disciplines of Lent. So just what are these 3 Lenten disciplines? Well, I'm sure they are very familiar to you. They are prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. What we're going to do in this webinar is to take a fresh look at these 3 traditional disciplines in order to see how we can practice them in some very practical ways and with the right focus and attitude so that they can help us to recognize what God wants to do with us. And part of this fresh look is that we're going to briefly draw from 3 well-known Hollywood movies, one for each discipline, in order to get a better handle on just what the focus of this discipline is.